One life is not enough. Man is the masterpiece of God's creation. Only man was made by a special creative act of God. Only man was made in God's own image. Only man possesses a mind and free will. Only man can split the atom and delve deeply into the mysteries of nature. Only man can invent television, build an Empire State Building, and fly faster than sound. As the psalmist says, "What is man, that thou art mindful of him? Yet thou hast made him little less than God, and dost crown him with glory and honor. Thou hast given him dominion over the works of thy hands. Thou hast put all things under his feet." Psalm 8, verses 4 to 6. Despite the unique excellence of man, God would be a master of cruelty if man's existence were limited to this present life. Unless there is life beyond the grave, man is not God's masterpiece. Unless there is a future life, God has failed in the creation of his masterpiece. Unless there is another life, man is the most miserable of all God's creatures. One life is not enough for God's masterpiece. If in this life only we have hope, says St. Paul, we are of all men most to be pitied. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 19. One life is not enough for that 18-year-old boy who, with every promise of becoming a great musician, was killed on the battlefield. One life is not enough for those young men and women who were born blind or crippled and had to remain so all their lives. One life is not enough for that young man in a mental hospital, or that young girl at the sanatorium, or that elderly woman sitting in a wheelchair, an invalid all her life. One life is not enough for our beloved, who left us in the prime of life after having spent the last 2 years of her life in suffering and pain. No, one life is not enough. It cannot be enough. This present life does not make sense if there is not another life. Surely God did not create his masterpiece for suffering and pain. The resurrected Christ comes at this funeral and at every funeral to assure us that there is another life. Quote, "Because I live, you shall live also. I am the resurrection and the life. Whosoever believes in me shall never die, but shall have life everlasting." Unquote. Just as it is easier to study a jewel when it is lying on a piece of black velvet, so we will better understand life if we view it against the background of eternity. Against that background of eternity, the soldier's life is not snuffed out on the battlefield. Suffering may be momentary, but goodness is eternal. Quote, "Whipping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning." Unquote. Life does make sense. Man is God's masterpiece. God is not cruel. He's our Father. He loves. He cares. A 12-year-old boy lay very ill. One day, the mother of the boy ran frantically to a neighbor woman and cried, "The doctor says my boy has but 10 minutes to live. Will you come and talk to him?" The woman almost froze in her tracks. There was not time to call a priest. Just what would she say? What would you say if someone asked you to talk to a person who had only 10 minutes to live? This is what the woman did say. "My child, God loves you. God died to save you. God will come down here to take you home to him." The boy's face lightened, and eagerly he said, "Say it again, won't you please?" And she repeated, "God loves you. God gave his son to die for you. God will come down here to take you home to Him. If we are so precious to God that He did not hesitate to give His only Son to die for us, surely is it not reasonable to believe that He will take us home when we die? As He took home from a short temporal life to a life of eternity, from a life of suffering to a life where there is neither suffering, nor death, nor mourning, nor weeping anymore.